What's up, y'all? It's Anisha, and my mandate is to equip, encourage, empower, inspire, and ignite women to influence and impact their world, all for the glory of God. I am a wife, a mom, a ministry leader, a corporate IT leader by day, and a business owner and founder by night. I love all things Jesus, business, and letting my creative juices and imagination run wild. If you have found yourself here, I want you to go ahead, pull up a seat, because this is the PowHerhouse Podcast. On this episode, we're going to hear from one of the amazing authors of the Unveiling Her devotional, an anthology written by some of the students of PowHerhouse Academy. Each of their stories are packed with insights on how God unveiled their calling in this journey that we call life. The hope is that you will find the missing piece of your life's story through one of theirs. So buckle up and let's get into today's episode. I have a very special guest. She is one of the authors of the Unveiling Her devotional, which is a devotional that we produce together as a collective at the PowHerhouse Academy. So I want to welcome Prophetess Shalonda Millidge. Welcome, sis.
Hello. So glad to be here.
I am super glad that you are here with us. It's so interesting, right? Like how our lives crossed paths again. We would have never, ever in our whole, at least me, I would have never thought in a whole million years we would be reconnected, but God is just so faithful. And to know that you are on the same journey of living your life out for God is just so beautiful to see. So I'm thankful that God reconnected us in the way that He has.
Absolutely.
I have a question. Do you feel like God has more for you? Like there's something burning on the inside of you, but you just don't know what it is or where to start. Or maybe you know exactly what is burning on the inside of you. Maybe you know exactly what you feel God is calling you to do, but you just don't know how to go about doing it. Well, I am happy to be the very first to let you know that in January of 2024, the doors to PowHerhouse Academy will be open. See, PowHerhouse Academy was created for women just like you. Women who have found that they have something to share with the world, but they just need a roadmap to getting that God-sized idea from their mind out into the marketplace. It's for the creatives, the multi-passionate thought leaders, the ones who God has called for such a time as this. Listen, your baby is ready to be birthed, and PowHerhouse Academy is literally the midwife you never knew you needed. Until now. So make 2024 your best year yet. To be the first to know when the doors officially open, or just to get some more details, I want you to text VIP to 803-303-8338. Okay, so first and foremost, I want you to share a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your story.
I am Shalonda Millidge. I am a mother of 3 sons. I'm a wife of one for about 15, 16 years almost now.
My God. Hey, we bless God.
About 16 years. And I'm grateful for my children. I'm grateful for the life that God has simply blessed me with, to be a wife, to be a mother. I live in the state of Georgia now. And a little bit about my journey on coming to find out who I am per se was mostly dedicated to a life surrendered to God. That's more important to me than anything.
Yeah. I agree. I think one of the things, like for us or just for anybody listening, is that living a life that's surrendered to God, even though at times it's challenging, it's like the most fulfilling life that you really could live. I think a lot of times when we struggle with contentment and feeling like we're living a life of purpose, sometimes it's because we just simply haven't totally surrendered to God. So I love that you shared that about yourself, about your story, about your background, and how that led us to this place that we are at. So since this episode is all about meeting the authors, what inspired you to write the Dear Warrior devotional that's within the Unveiling Her?
One, I started writing what I thought was Dear Warrior content on Facebook to those that were on my page. It really started out with me writing just a small note to myself personally in what was the worst state I thought of my life. And so I made a small note to myself during the time I was at the gym. And during that time when I made the note to myself, Dear Warrior, just saying to myself that there's greater purpose on the inside of you that you may not be able to even see or recognize that God has equipped you and called you with a purpose to be a warrior. So I made that small note just to remind myself of who I am in God. After making the note to myself, it continued with God every morning at the gym of me making letters out to those that were on my page. And so he began to just tell me, I want you to go there for 30 days, make a dedication to being steadfast and writing these letters to those that are out there, warriors who are out there who may need encouragement for such a time as this, and help to pull them up, help to uplift them. Because oftentimes, you can be in a place for so long and begin to even doubt that God has called you or have a purpose down on the inside of you. So that's how it got started with me with the Dear Warrior. And so when it was time for me to do the devotional, I thought it would be befitting for me to continue to make another note to a warrior that would read that message that would help to encourage them. Sometimes they could be on the same path, the same journey that I was on, but it would help to give them some sort of encouragement to let them know, hey, God is with you.
That is so good. As you were talking, like just all kinds of questions just came flooding to me. But I think the most pressing question that literally just came to my mind, like for real, is do you think that other women often struggle silently instead of opening up and inviting other people to help them carry their burdens?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I 100, 1,000% agree, because there could be shame for one where they may feel that no one understands their situation. No one in the world could be going through what they could be encountering. And so as a result, they feel as if I go through it alone versus sharing it with someone else, it keeps me covered, keeps my shame covered, keeps what I'm going through covered. But I think that getting someone that you can trust along with you to help to uplift you, because the word of God even tells us that it's better to have someone with you so that when one brother falls, that you have someone to lift you up. So I think it's important. Just have someone with you, have a voice in there with you to help you along the journey.
And I agree. I just want to hear your perspective as well, because obviously we all have different perspectives and we all have different circles of influence that we are a part of. But I find the same thing happening even in my circle of influence, where so many women, they struggle in silence and they don't allow themselves the room or open themselves up to relationships that could help them in their journey and give them like good godly advice. God didn't make you just to fail. God made you and he's building you, he's equipping you, and you have a voice that needs to be heard. So thank you, woman of God, because I believe we all need a dear warrior in our life. Okay. Okay. So I know.
Absolutely.
Yes. So in the devotional, I know one of the things that you mentioned was having open visions as a child and not really understanding the whole process of what that looked like. But as a kid, right? What was it like to experience open visions in the way that you did?
It was scary at times, kind of made you or made me think that something was wrong with me and didn't have anyone to share it with about what I saw or seeing things in advance, being able to have dreams about something that may happen like the next day, being able to tell my friends if they were getting ready to go somewhere or do something, and just having that back then, just a knowing on the inside, what I thought was just intuition of just saying, don't go, stay, or I'm not going because something just doesn't feel right. And then even oftentimes having dreams, like I said, at nighttime where the whole scene just plays out. So it really was a little scary, a little uncomfortable to me because I didn't really have anyone around that could kind of guide me in the direction that I needed to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I think that back then, obviously, there wasn't much language for experiences like that unless you were in certain types of churches and circles. But I want to encourage moms here, or maybe grandparents who are here, who may be listening. Your child or your grandchild, they could be experiencing these very same things. And at some point, it's not even at some point, like it's up to us to help steward that in
That's
them,
right.
because it can be scary. Shoot, even today, I still get a little fearful sometimes about certain things I see. I'm like, oh my. So I understand. I don't think I had open visions as a child, but I definitely had visions and I had dreams. And so it was very interesting. So speaking of open visions and dreams, one, do you still experience open visions today? And is your experience different than it was when you were a kid?
Yes. So one, yes, I still do have open visions today. It's not the same as it was when I was a kid. When I was a kid, they were short, small, I would call them now small clips that would appear before me. Now they're more long, drawn out, and sometimes they come and go. It's not something, of course, that you can just turn on or off. And so
Right.
God has his way of just showing up to you in the most awkward moments. And I feel like now they're definitely more vivid now because I have more knowledge and understanding of what his word says. They're more clearer now versus when I was a child. It was just like, this is a little scary. I don't know what's happening. And so you think that you're odd and you definitely don't want to tell anybody because that definitely back then would feel like you need to be in a mental institution somewhere.
Exactly.
So definitely keeping it shut up to yourself, really, to me growing up, it wasn't a good thing. And it did not help me along the way. But as I got older and met with my leader, who I've been with now since I've been 17 years old, gave me clearer understanding of what the visions that I was seeing and gave me clearer understanding of who it was that God had called me to be.
Man, that's amazing. First of all, to be under a leader since you've been 17, like that is such a testament, because I know that you are getting like fed and that you're growing and maturing, because I can see it even from the short time that we reconnected. Like you were actually sold out to what God wanted to do in you and through you, and to have a leader to cover you for so long. Like that's just so beautiful to see, because you don't really see that. You see people who are loyal to leaders, but no growth. That's not your story. And so I'm just thankful that God still has and is raising leaders of such caliber that can really pull out the destiny of God in them. That's just beautiful. So before I get too deep, I want to know, what was the strangest dream that you had as a kid that you can remember?
One verbatim that I can remember in my teenage years of him coming to me as a teenager. And during this time, it was when I had lost my uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, growing up back then, like losing someone that you live in a house with, that's a big deal. So it's like now you get to really know and see death in its face. And so during that time, I believe I was like 15, 14 years old, something like that. And I literally saw, prior to him dying, I saw the spirit of death come into the house. And so that, to me, as a child, it shakes you because, of course, you're thinking like, what is this that you see? And so not to be able to say anything to my grandmother, to my grandfather, because those were the ones that was raising me, not to be able to say anything to try to see if I could help or maybe stop the process from happening. I think that was more terrifying than anything, and really shook me to my core. And really, it was my grandmother. She kept saying something is wrong with her. We may need to put her in a mental institution somewhere because she's saying that she's seeing all these different things and hearing all these different things. And they didn't understand. They just didn't understand. And I knew basically from what my grandfather, he was the one really had a lot of impact in telling me about Christ. And so even for me, trying to explain to him what I saw or the things that I was hearing, it was almost like he just didn't get it either. And so it made me feel really all by myself to try to figure out and gravitate to what it was that was happening with me. Even so much, you feel alone, you feel isolated, you feel like no one really understands what's taking place. And so you're left to a place. And I knew, of course, might not have the full words, but prayer all the time. And I would find myself in the closets praying all the time, just praying and asking God for understanding, just praying and saying, don't let me go to the crazy house. Don't let me be mentally disabled. Don't let me lose my mind, because those were the only words that I knew as a child. And so I would say as a child, that moment was really the scariest moment for me. And a second time around when I saw the spirit of death come in was prior to my grandfather's. He was getting ready to lose his sister. And so she was at the hospital, but I saw the spirit of death come into the house. And of course, I had already started to grow and develop in the knowledge of God. And so I knew at that moment that it was the spirit of death that was coming. And so it was nothing that I could, of course, say or tell them, but just to really pray for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just so amazing to hear this. One, because we low-key grew up together. So it's like just to know that you were going through experiences that were similar. And I think that just goes to show again how as parents, we have to be better stewards for our children, because we might not have had that same stewardship in our lives. And sometimes it's hard, but once you know, you know. So now that the people of God know that if you take me, I don't know about you, but even for my story, like I promise you, you would have never in a million years thought that I would be where I am today. Like you would have thought something, but you wouldn't have thought this. I just think, I'm just saying, I was definitely a lot. But yeah, so I'm thankful that you're sharing that part of your life with us to help shed light for other parents who may have children who are like us. You may not be able to have a specific timeline or time frame, but when do you believe God began to unveil his calling on your life?
When I was 22.
Wow.
And right when I was 22 years old, and I was going along in ministry and, of course, sharing dreams and visions with my leader of different things that I saw concerning ministry. And one afternoon, I came to Bible study, and I came into her office, and she began to tell me that she says, I have a book for you that's going to help you. And she didn't know that, or maybe she did know that I really was having some struggles trying to understand what was happening with me, because I realized the closer that I was getting to God, the more these visions were happening, the more the dreams were happening almost every night. And so when I got to Bible study that night, and she gave me a book called The Seer. And so she told me, she said, this book is going to help you navigate through the spaces that you're walking in now and who it is that God has called you to be. And so she began to tell me, she says that you are a prophet, you are a seer. And so then she also began to tell me that it's not a bad thing, because I was telling her at this point, I don't want to be it, basically. And she says it's such a good thing because you prevent so many different things in the lives of God's people and help to save them as a watchman. And I just began to weep in the office, and I said, it just sounds like it's a big responsibility, not just for myself, but I never just wanted to be one that would, disappoint God.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be one that would say things or do things that just didn't please him or be a benefit to his people. And so to have that on my mindset, to feel like that's a weight to carry, I was just like, yeah, I think I'll pass. I think I'll pass on it. But she kept encouraging me to stay in the word and use the book as a tool. But first, use my word as the first thing to help me to grow and to navigate through this space. And she began to even tell me different things on how over the years that God would use me in different spaces and all of this. And so it was a journey, truly a journey. But as I look back now, I wouldn't change anything about it.
Yep. I agree. I agree 100%. We get so anxious. Okay, what am I supposed to do? What's my purpose? What's my calling? What's my this? What's my that? But for those who God has unveiled it to them, just let God do what he's going to do, because the journey, he prepares you and he makes you in the journey. It's not boom, you get there and everything works out. No, the journey is what makes you. The Lord's like, listen, I know what I'm doing over here. I've been doing this since before time began. Okay, like I know a little bit. I'm just saying, just let God be God. Let him be God. Okay, can you share with us what is your favorite excerpt from Dear Warrior?
Oh, my favorite excerpt, I believe it's under the setup. And so it was talking about how I tried all I knew how not to submit to God and to go where he was trying to take me. But I eventually discovered that I had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my favorite because I wanted to include that in there for someone to give them an understanding of what true surrenderance to God looks like. Because like you were just saying, oftentimes we want to go ahead of God, or we want to have what they would see as grand things, as being a prophet. But the thing is, it's a process.
Yeah.
And so the first thing to it is surrendering to God, giving up of yourself. I always would say, my life is not my own. But more so within the last couple months, I told God, I said, I repent for making that statement so long throughout my life, because now I really fully understand what that means to say, my life is not my own.
Yeah.
It's not my own.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong to me. My life don't belong to my children. It doesn't belong to my husband. It doesn't belong to my relatives. I'm just sold out to him. And so that's what that insert to me means. Like, we have to fully submit to God all the way, not halfway, not part-time, but full-time.
Yeah.
Have a dedicated life to him all the time, when we rise up, when we lie down. And so submitting to him, it helps us to be able to cultivate those things that's on the inside of us, and help us to understand what it is that God is trying to work out on the inside. And like me, from a child coming through my teenage years, not knowing, but all I had to do was really submit. You know, I had people coming around all the time saying, as a teenager, especially, come to church. I'm inviting you to come to church. I'm inviting you to do this. And I'm like, ma'am, sir, I'm okay. But in the back of my mind, I know, right? Like, I'm having these dreams and I'm having these open visions in my living room where I'm telling my friends, don't go out tonight. Don't go over there tonight. Please stay home. And so I knew that all these different things was happening. And I knew that I needed to go to the house of God, and I needed to find a house where I could be taught and get clarity on what was taking place in my life. But I chose to say, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. You know, I still got a little bit more living to do. I'm not ready yet. And so surrenderance, it plays a big part.
Yeah. And I'm glad you included that too, because I don't want to say that's the number one thing, but I'm pretty sure that it's definitely up there to be the number one thing that we struggle with, is like fully surrendering our lives to God. It's that. And I guess the second thing I would say is like really just trusting God. But I think that goes hand in hand, because you have to trust him to fully surrender your life to him. I'm glad you included that, because there are people who need to know that it is the fully surrendered life. Like when we lay down our lives and understand, this ain't even my life. This is God's life. Like, God is living this life through me. It's not about me. Nobody else owns my life but God.
That's right.
Things make so much more sense. I promise you. Yes. Things make so much more sense. So what do you hope readers will gain from reading your devotional?
I hope that they would gain confidence, one in themselves, if they're at a space where they're growing in God and having what I called it back then, a knowing or a sense. Now, of course, like prophetic is everywhere, teachings and all of that. But then you still have people that they don't know. And so they need clarity on it. So I hope that someone that's reading my portion of the devotional will gain confidence, gain trust in God, gain dependence on his word, get to know who he really is. Because once they understand who God is, then they'll begin to understand what's on the inside of them and how he can help them to navigate through this life with the call that's on their life.
Thank you so much. So I only have one last question, and that question is this. What's next for you? Do you plan to write more devotionals? Do you plan to do other things? Like, what's on your agenda, woman of God?
So next for me will be Dear Warrior. And I want to create something that's not just on the platform, Facebook and Instagram, but something tangible that can go into the homes of wives and mothers that would help them to build strength and encouragement on a daily basis. And so that's the next thing that I'm actually working on, something that can go in the house, whether it be 7-day journal or 30 days declarations or prayer cards, just anything that they can have tangible with them for those days when they feel like I just can't make it today. And so that's the next thing. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Listen, the women of God, they ready. Like, they've been ready. They have been waiting for Dear Warrior to hit their homes in Jesus' name. So we thank God for what he is doing in your life. And thank you so much for being on the PowHerhouse Podcast and really just sharing your story, your heart, and just wisdom and nuggets of truth that I know if people pick them up, they would see themselves blossom in a way that it would only be God. So thank you, woman of God. This is the end of this particular episode, but we cannot wait to have you back because I feel like we got a little bit more digging to do. I just feel like there's some more stuff that we got to get to. Yeah. You were spitting truth. I low-key didn't want this to end, but of course, they say all good things must come to an end, but I don't believe that because Jesus is Lord. And he will never end. His love for us will never end. So instead of that, I'm going to say, woman of God, thank you, and we can't wait to see you next time on the PowHerhouse Podcast.
Thank you.